In order to fully engage your players into your world, you need to give them something to hold on to. More than just their lives, players value the effort they exert into your story. This is why you often hear players risking their lives to save the NPC that serves little to no purpose but makes them happy. But trying to engage your players isn't always simple. The first few sessions can sometimes be slow, as they're dropped into a new environment completely unsure of what to expect. But you can avoid questioning if your players will be invested in your world by utilizing a few simple tricks before you even gather for session 1. So in this video, we're going to be talking about a few ways you can engage your players as early as your very next session. To understand how to get your players invested in your world, you need to understand what hooks players' attention in the first place, and why they grow attached to, sometimes seemingly random elements of your setting. Players like playing in games where their actions create change, even on a small scale, and when the world responds to these actions and changes. These changes don't need to be grand either. Oftentimes the smaller changes can feel more personal. After all, you can save the massive changes for the larger feats they engage in later on. They might hear rumors of their feats, see the consequences of their minor failures or quest-related oversights, or even be rewarded or punished by individuals based on their reputation. Knowing that the world recognizes and reacts to them, players naturally lean in and become more aware of their own deeds and misdeeds. Additionally, players are commonly attached to the journey of their character and the struggles said character will need to overcome to grow and become stronger. Their collective successes and failures contribute to their identity, and when the world reacts to this growth, you show your player that they're more than just the stats on their sheet, but a person with a place in the world who has a growing history, something they will want to cultivate and protect. So when you as the GM respect this journey and shine a spotlight on it, your players will feel recognized, giving them something to strive for as they pour more of themselves into the game. Kind of a side note, but I personally believe that there's nothing wrong with discussing PC death being removed from the campaign. Killing them is easy, but showing them the result of their failure can often be worse than a death. A player who sees their shortcomings hurt the world that they've come to care about is something that I think can be more effective than outright death in some cases, but that's a topic for another video. So, what then could you do to foster this engagement? First, if you haven't yet started, my biggest piece of advice that I myself do every time I'm preparing to run a new game is allow your players to aid you in creating the world or setting. When you allow the players to peek behind the screen and be involved in your creative process, you can instantly create player involvement and excitement. Now, this isn't about giving away your plot or handing over control, but more about reminding the players that D&D is a collaborative game, and that you don't need to be the only one whose hands create the world. Ask your players if they would like to help create settings in the world that are tied to their characters in some way. When players contribute, they naturally care about the outcomes. They'll notice when a villain threatens a location they helped design, or when choices echo something they suggested. That sense of ownership builds emotional stakes without you having to force it. Engagement also grows from curiosity. Players want to see the consequences of their input. By letting them co-create, you give them a reason to pay attention, explore, and invest in the world. One way I had handled this was that a player said she wanted to be the victim of a dragon attack, and that her hometown was destroyed, her family killed, and she fled, swearing revenge on the dragon who had caused the destruction and loss. I had informed the player that dragons had largely been hunted to extinction, but what we could do was say that the attack marks the re-emergence of dragons, and the town destroyed was a massive mining city, plunging the country into economic turmoil. Now, the player herself was the child of a dragon and tiefling, with the irony I hadn't told her being that it wasn't a dragon that had burned down her town, even though a dragon was indeed spotted. This was a deeper conspiracy that was not revealed until later in the game. Because of her backstory, the entire direction of the game was now set to always include her character as a potential person of great importance. This was also the catalyst for the god that we would then create together, a god who hunts dragons who serve evil causes, but urges his paladins to seek out righteous dragons to ally with. Moving on though, if you already have a game running, this doesn't exclude you from being able to grab your table's attention. If you're already running a pre-established game, don't worry, you can still garner deeper engagement. Even in a world that's mostly set, you can give players a sense of agency and personal investment. Start by tying elements of the story to their characters' choices, backgrounds, or goals. What you can do is reintroduce positively received characters or quest threads from the past with new context, taking into account the player's actions during those quests or toward those characters, but now with new information or higher stakes. When players see that their decisions have impact, even in subtle ways, they start paying closer attention and making meaningful choices. You can also encourage input by asking questions during sessions, such as, how did your character react to this and why? Or, what would you like to see in this town? Moments like these make players feel heard and reinforce the idea that the story isn't just happening to them, it's happening with them. Once, the party worked with a cleric to dismantle a cult. They grew pretty attached to this cleric, and over the course of the quest, even saw her promoted to an inquisitor. That should have been the end of it, as I intended on her only simply being a contact for the party when in this specific town. But later on, the party find themselves tied up in a government conspiracy involving vampires. In an attempt to flee for their lives from one of these vampires, they teleport to the farthest town they can accurately make it to. I asked them where they wanted to teleport, as knowing the location well is vital to conduct the teleport without issue, and seeing as this was a crucial emergency, they chose the house of the cleric they had worked with since they had been there so many times before. They make it there safely, banging on her door, looking for protection, and of course, she lets them in, but in doing so, they've now just exposed her to the same dangerous knowledge that they came into. There was this moment before the vampire appears, and after the tension from the moment had faded, where one of the players at the table said, "Wait, what if the vampire knows we're here?" And right on cue, said vampire makes his appearance known, which effectively marks that NPC now for death. That NPC didn't end up dying, thanks to the party, but for a long time her safety was a massive concern. By reintroducing loved characters or places back into the story and making them relevant again, you can tap into your players' strong feelings and further engross them into the plot. Now, as we wrap up here for today, I want to share one last thing. No matter what stage your game is in, engaging players is about grounding them in something familiar before asking them to care about something grand. A brand new world can feel overwhelming. Kingdoms, factions, relationships in and outside the city, as well as those relationships' histories, are all just noise until something becomes personal. Instead of opening with a sweeping narrative about the state of the world, start small. A town, maybe a family, just some single problem that needs to be solved now. When players understand what normal looks like, they'll feel that sense of urgency when that normalcy is threatened to be taken away. Early stakes should be humanoid-sized. A missing person, sick child, or maybe a town on the brink of financial collapse. These aren't always massive problems, but they're understandable ones. Once players care about these things, scaling up feels natural. Saving the entire country or kingdom means more when they remember what it was like to save one person living inside it. And that applies to your mid-game as well. Don't be afraid to recenter to smaller plot lines to re-engage the players. If they aren't engaged, they won't argue with you trying to build something that does engage them. I recently started a new campaign where I get to be a player, and I just had some of these thoughts on my mind as I was playing. It was a great session though. I feel like the GM did a great job not making things feel too heavy for a session 1. I've played a lot of games where I get hit real early with lots of names and locations that just become hard to remember. It feels like your character's in this vast world, which isn't always a bad thing, but it can be kind of overwhelming when you're just jumping in. But anyway, that's all for today. I had session 0 for my new campaign this week, and I'm hoping I can find time in my schedule to do some session recaps. Though they may be something reduced down to a YouTube short format, maybe? I suppose we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching.